Welcome to the Earth's Edge podcast. I'm your host, James McManus. At Earth's Edge, we run guided expeditions with a focus on environmental and cultural sustainability. We created this podcast to share stories from people who have found the outdoors and fallen in love with adventure. Each month, we're giving away one of our summit jackets worth €150. To be in the running, all you need to do is subscribe to our mailing list at earths-edge.com/podcast. There's a link in the show notes. Now, for today's guest.
Last year with the Black Lives Matter movement, that whole thing where people were putting up a black square on social media, blacking out the media for the day, and that was such a performative gesture. There was nothing that was going to change that. What we need to start doing is changing the people around us.
That was Babs Nzvaura, who worked for Earth's Edge from 2014 to 2018. She tells me about climbing Kilimanjaro, crossing snowy passes on the way to Everest Base Camp, seeing Ladakh for the first time, and visiting Machu Picchu. We also chat about being Black and Irish and how that impacted her life. We start out talking about growing up in a small town in the west of Ireland and how she fell in love with the great outdoors. So let's jump in there. So Babs, you grew up in Shannon in County Clare. What was that like, and were you into going on adventures when you were a kid?
Yeah, growing up in Shannon was good. It's a town where people come to work really more so than people come to live. Did we go on many adventures when we were young? No, not really, actually, to be honest. We didn't. My dad would be quite outdoorsy now, but in the sense of he enjoys his gardening. But exploring mountains, exploring nature, that's not something that would have been done in my family, actually. So no, I wouldn't have gone on that many adventures when I was young.
I know you were super into sport. You played a lot of football growing up, yeah?
I did, yeah. I played quite a lot of sport growing up. I was very active in that sense. Enjoyed a lot of sport, but as I said, we never really went on any adventures, so to speak, exploring the outdoors. So it was very much kind of team sports that I would have been involved in.
And you were saying that you then went on to college to study adventure tourism management in Tralee. If you didn't go on adventures with your family growing up, how did you come to pick that degree?
I suppose, your teen years, you're a bit lost. You don't really know what you want to do or where you're going. And I suffered quite a lot with my mental health at the time. And I think it was my fourth year when I was in school. One of my teachers actually took us on a hike. And I remember coming home and thinking, oh my God, I feel so much better after this. I didn't really understand why I felt better after it or what it was, but I knew I wanted to do it again. Fast forward to after doing my leaving cert, I moved to Cork. And when I was up in Cork, I had a few friends that were into the outdoors. And I started exploring a bit more of the outdoors. I'd come home from Clare and I'd explore a lot more of what Clare has to offer. A lot of surfing was done. And I just found a love of the outdoors that I never knew I had. And you know what? It helped me so much with my mental health and I could understand why. So obviously I wanted to continue doing it. So eventually then I went to Cork. I was going to study to be a nurse, but that wasn't my calling. That really wasn't my calling. And I took a year out. And after that year out, I got offered a place in Tralee to do adventure tourism management. And I just knew I wanted to be in the outdoors. I wanted to be an outdoor instructor. That was the main goal in doing that course. Yeah. That's how I ended up in Tralee, actually. And sure, I was in Kerry and it was just pure heaven with the outdoors.
Yeah, absolutely. Kerry's probably the best place in the country for outdoors.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
What was the course like? Was it good? Would you recommend it?
I would. I'm not sure they're still running the course in its original format, but I would absolutely 100% recommend it. I found it really good. We had some really good lecturers that came from different backgrounds with a load of experience. We worked with a lot of providers in Kerry, guys in Capnally, some of the lads that work for Earth's Edge, Reese and Lorcan, and there's so many more that I can't mention that we would have worked with. And actually that was my first introduction to Aenith Carroll, who is somebody that has had a massive impact on my life and the outdoors.
Yeah, so the listeners might know, but Aenith is one of our expedition leaders. And talk to me about that. What impact did she have on you?
The outdoors is a male-oriented industry. There's a lot of men within the industry. And I remember the first time I met Aenith, she was doing a course with us on Leave No Trace. And I just thought, wow, this is incredible. I'd never really seen a female instructor before. She was just really incredible. Her stories, her journey to get to where she'd become. And I remember coming away from that course going, yeah, I've definitely made the right choice. I really want to be like her. So as the years went on, I actually didn't meet her for another, I'd say 6 years after that, when I came to Earth's Edge, and she was one of the guides within Earth's Edge. And my very first trip that I went on, which would have been Kilimanjaro, she was the guide on that trip. And I learned so much from her, you know, I was just inspired by this really powerful female who was so competent in her job, and how inspiring she was to everybody that she came in contact with. So yeah, that was how she's had an impact on me.
I think the outdoors, like it is very male dominated, you know, even now it is. And it's probably, I'm not going to show your age now, but it's probably 10 years since you went to college. Like, but it's great. Like, there's more and more women getting involved in expedition leading and stuff like that. But clients, when they're expecting to meet an expedition leader at the airport on a mountain, your prejudice there is to meet a man. So I think all of our female guides have to really do an absolutely awesome job, because they sometimes get challenged a little bit more and stuff like that. So it's amazing, and they're all fantastic. So come here, how did you come about working with us, Babs? So let's talk about that a little bit. You came and did customer service and sales with us. How was that? And how did it come about?
Yeah, so as I was saying, I finished up in Tralee, and I was still a bit lost, really not sure what I was going to do. You know, it was quite hard to try and find a job within the industry. So I decided to move to London for a year. It was going to be a year, and see how I got on. So I went to London, and I was working within retail. I was working in luxury retail, which was an experience, but I was a complete fish out of water. There's nothing luxury about me. So I was
some bogger from Clare, like overworking. And where were you working in London?
I was working in Selfridges and Harrods at the time.
Wow.
And
yeah.
Yeah, I was a complete fish out of water. Like, you know, the environment wasn't me, but it was actually where I realized how good I was at selling. I realized that I could build such a rapport with people. I actually made some really good friends while I was working in Harrods, you know, Irish customers that used to come over, and, you know, I'd go on a trip and I'd help them out with their shopping and stuff like that. And to this day, we still keep in touch. You know, I'd still get a Christmas card. So I noticed that I actually had a knack for this kind of thing. London is a bit of a concrete jungle. It's a concrete jungle. I really loved the outdoors. And again, I found myself struggling with my mental health. So I needed to see mountains. I needed to see water. I was sick of looking at buildings. And I decided that I was coming home. And I was coming home to Clare. That was the plan, was coming home to Clare. But I decided to just start applying for jobs anywhere. You know, I said, I take a risk. I take a risk and see what happens. So was it a lecturer of mine? I think it was. She sent me a link to a job that was being advertised for you guys. And I decided to apply for it. I actually did not think I'd get the job, to be honest. I really didn't think I'd get the job. So I was like, sure, look, I'll just apply for it and see. And I remembered quite clearly, because I was coming home for the Great Limerick run at the time. And you'd said to me, look, I can only do an interview on Monday or Tuesday with that suit. And I was like, great, I'll do the Monday because I'm flying out on the Tuesday. And I said, sure, look, I'll go up to Dublin anyway. So off I went, put on my little high heels to get all the way up to Dublin on the train. A heel. Yeah. If I'd known better, I should have put on my runners all the way up to Dublin. So got up to Dublin anyway, and I got in with you guys, still not expecting to get the job whatsoever, like, you know. And I just thought, sure, look, I'll give it my best and see what happens. And 5 years later, I was still there.
Yeah, we managed to hold on to you for 5 years. No, it was great. Yeah, so you did all our, like, you're basically main point of contact for all of our customer service and sales people wanting to chat about trips and all that. So yeah, it was awesome. And while you were with us, Babs, you did like 5 trips. We send all of our staff away to do an expedition per year, and your first one was to Killi in 2015. How was that?
I loved Killi. Oh gosh, I loved Killi. It was, you know, going back to the motherland. I was in my element. I've never prepared so much for anything as I did for Killi. You know, I had everything. To be honest, I was actually overly prepared. I packed way too much. I brought way too many potatoes, and I love potatoes, but I brought way too many of them for that trip. But I loved Killi. It was great. And it was actually, as I said earlier on, it was the first trip that I went on with Aina. A whole year, I'd spent so much time talking on the phone about what our trips are and what we do and what the expedition leaders and doctors do. But to actually see it come together was absolutely amazing. from my job point of view. It was just brilliant to see all the work that we do in the office actually in action. And I thought, fuck, we're slick.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's why it's so important that all of the office team go, because, you know, it's really important that we stay connected to people's experiences and all that. It's actually funny you were saying that you carry too much stuff. I don't know if you know this, but when I'm doing Killi talks, I still mention you. Like, I have a picture of you and I'm like, this is Babs, right? And this gobshite, she brought like 10 kilos of stuff up to the summit. So if anyone who hasn't been on a big mountain before, you're basically carrying quite a lot of stuff. You know, the porters are on Killi are carrying the bulk of your gear and you're just taking a day bag. But for summit night especially, because you're going for 15 hours, you want to bring exactly what you need, but not too much in your pack. So you're as light as possible going to summit. And Babs said about 3 kilos of probably potatoes or something.
Probably
did you?
was. It was
you're like totally overloaded. Like, yeah.
Overly prepared is what I did. And I learned my lesson. It was a lesson learned. And you know what? It's funny that you say it at the talks. I used to say it all the time on the phone when I was talking to somebody about packing light. Packing light.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing about expeditions is, like, you know, you could really stress that one point, say, make sure you pack light, but then you'll forget about another one or whatever. There's so many little bits of details. In 2016, you went to Nepal to Everest Base Camp. How was that one?
Yeah, Everest Base Camp that was on my bucket list for a long time. You know, I grew up knowing about Kilimanjaro. I kind of, you know, Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camps, they were the kind of big mountains, or so to speak, that I kind of knew and I wanted to do. Everest Base Camp was possibly one of the most beautiful trips I've ever done. I loved Everest Base Camp because you were walking through villages, you were meeting people, you know, you were meeting loads of different people, and it was just a really relaxed trip. Although we were the first group that did. Do you remember the Chola Pass?
Oh, I do remember it well. Like,
So we were the first group that did the Chola Pass, and by God, I remember it snowed so much. I remember going up the Chola Pass and thinking, "Oh gosh, I'm not going to make this now. Jesus, this is going on. I'm not going to make it." And by the time I got to the other side, I was just so exhausted, and so was everybody in the team. We were all just so tired. But the kindness that everybody showed each other after that struggle of getting up the Chola Pass, I'll never forget it. You know, there was hands over each other. Are you doing okay? Are you all right? Do you need an extra pair of socks or anything like that? And do you know what? That is something that really stands out for me for Everest Base Camp.
Yeah, it's lovely to see people come together. Like, you know, it's nothing like a bit of bad weather and snow and hardship to pull a team together.
That's exactly it.
So you then went on and did Stockangri in Ladakh in 2017. It's a trip that I was telling you about for years before you went there. Did it live up to all the expectations? Like?
And more. Yeah. I loved India. I loved everything about Ladakh. I loved everything about Leh. Stockangri was possibly my favorite trip that I've ever done. Now, I've unfinished business with that mountain and I will go back. But the journey through Stockangri was amazing. Like, you know, that was one trip that I really enjoyed because I made some really, really good friends. And, you know, we were all from such different backgrounds. And I learned quite a lot from each individual that was on that trip. Some people that I still talk to today. Again, Aenith was the guide on that trip again. Actually, fun fact, I went on all my 4 trips with Aenith.
No way.
Actually, no, the last one I didn't. It was Reese was the last one because, Reese was the last one.
I thought it was you and Lou together in Nepal.
Oh, it was Lou, was it?
Oh my God, you're so in love with Aenith.
Oh my God. Oh, yeah, sorry, Aenith. I'm like having a love fest here. But Stockangri was just amazing. The local guides in Stockangri, wow. No question is too stupid. Nothing is ever too small. They will literally do everything for you. Anything for you. Yeah. And the food alone, unbelievable. I go back for that. And it's a heaven if you're veggie. Absolute heaven.
I know, yeah. It's always funny, some places where we work, like Russia comes to mind when someone puts in like vegan or something kind of complicated and you're like, oh, that's going to be a lot of buckwheat. But India is a great place to be vegetarian and vegan. The food is just unreal. Yeah,
no, I love Stockangri, I must say.
And then finally you finish up at Machu Picchu. How was that experience?
Oh, Machu Picchu was just so lovely. It was really lovely. You know, for a long time, I'd had this vision, and my goal was always to do all these big mountains. Like, I remember talking to you and telling you that I'd never want to do Machu Picchu because I thought it'd be too easy for me or something. And like pure ignorance out of me to be saying that. But when I did actually do Machu Picchu, it was just beautiful. It was the trek into Machu Picchu, the people, the food. I found it, and I actually went on that trip with one of my best friends, Sarah. That was her first expedition. And, you know, it's a trip that will live in my memory. It's pretty up there with Stock Angry. And I kind of always think, why did I never want to do Machu Picchu? Because I just thought it wasn't hard enough for me. But it was just the journey. I've never laughed so much as I did on that trip with the group of people that we went on to. So I actually, you know what, I'm just thinking there, I'm like, the theme of all the trips that I've done is the people that I've met.
Yeah.
Because they made the trips for me. They really did. You know, the last group that I went to with Machu Picchu was the Nasus crowd out in Killi. My God, They were hilarious. I honestly could not laugh anymore. I just couldn't. And there was never, if anybody was struggling, again, the kindness that people have for each other when you're doing a trek or when you're doing an expedition, if anybody was struggling, we all rallied around. Everyone rallies around to make sure that you get the most out of your journey. And I just think it's wonderful to see, to be in the presence of such like-minded people.
Yeah, it's a reoccurring theme on everyone I chat to in my own experiences as well. It's just the people you meet and the conversations and the bonds, because you just get into that wild place and you just have so much time for people.
Yeah.
And they have some, you know, it's fantastic. Like, it's just such a nice experience.
Yeah.
So Babs, if you were chatting to someone now and they're thinking about doing one of these trips, like, you know, they're listening to you now in the deepest, darkest part of the pandemic, and they're thinking about maybe hopefully getting out and doing an expedition later this year or into maybe early part of 2022, what would your top tip be for them?
Just do it.
Yeah.
Just do it. What are you waiting for? Your future self will thank you after you've done it.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's like, why would you not do it?
Why would you not do it?
If you have the time.
Yeah. And, you know, we're living in really uncertain times at the moment. If you feel like doing it, just get up and do it. Get a pair of boots, lace them up, and start with whatever's in your backyard and work your way from there.
Awesome. So, Kamira, I want to ask you, you decided to leave Earth's Edge in 2018. It's actually really interesting, Babs. I was saying to the lads in the office, like, when you originally said, look, I'm moving back to Clare, so you're going to hand in your notice, I was saying to you, look, why don't you work remotely? And I think you can agree it never really worked for us because you were kind of out of the loop socially the 1 or 2 days you were up in the office.
Yeah.
And it's interesting now that we're all remote working, all the kind of crack and chat happens on Zoom. So it's completely different.
Yeah.
The working life has changed massively. Anyway, that's just a side note. What I wanted to ask you is tell the listeners what you're up to now.
Yeah, so I left Earth's Edge, 2018 was it? Yeah, it was 2018. Yeah. And I went back to college. I did a master's in education, done that, and I'm working within the education sector now. So that's been great. I'm kind of working within Clare and Limerick is what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Wicked.
So that's what I've been doing since I left.
Might get you back in the office sometime virtually, like, you know, what you reckon?
Yeah. Listen, you'll never say never.
Yeah. You're like, under your breath, you're like, no, I don't fancy working for you again, man. Let's take a break there for some quick fire questions. What was your first job?
Call center.
What song is always on your workout playlist?
Beyonce, Sorry.
Nice. What are you reading right now?
Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi.
If you were stranded on a mountain with one celebrity, who would it be?
Beyonce. See a pattern there?
Yeah, big time. What's your favorite food to eat on a mountain?
Oh, good question. I actually bring Tatoes with me, so I munch on Tatoes all the time.
Do you? Like 32 pack or what? Like?
No, I'd crush them up into Ziploc bags, like, you know, so I have enough stash for a day. As you know, I'm obsessed with Tatoes.
Yeah, salt and vinegar potatoes. Actually, I do remember that, yeah. What's your favorite piece of kit?
My favorite piece of kit, down jacket.
What's your biggest pet peeve when traveling?
Biggest pet peeve when traveling? Lateness.
If money wasn't a factor, what would you do all day?
Oh, wow. Explore the whole world.
Very good answer. Very salesy answer. That's what I like to hear. Go on more Earth's Edge trips. Yeah. Describe yourself in 3 words. Adventurous,
kind, and spontaneous. Oh, that was quite difficult.
So, come here, Babs. Many of our clients and the listeners, like without having met you, obviously they've heard your lovely tones, but they'll have no idea that you're a proud Black Irish woman. How is that like? Last year, obviously, with the Black Lives Matter movement, I know you and a lot of other Black and brown people in Ireland and all over the world found their voice. Like, talk to me about that. I'd love to chat to you about it.
Yeah, I agree that a lot. The Black Lives Matter movement last year had an impact, especially in Ireland. As we've talked earlier, I grew up in Shannon. I found it quite difficult being Black and living in a small town. I was always grouped into something. There were quite a few racist incidents that my family would have come across, that I would have come across in school. Like, when you're in school, conformity is everything. You want to be a part of the crowd, but I stood out because of the colour of my skin. So that made it quite difficult to navigate my school years. And I always felt like, the token, as I said, as we've mentioned, I used to play quite a lot of team sports. I felt like the token Black person on every team that I was in. I never forged any deep or real friendships with anybody. So yeah, I found that quite difficult.
Ireland, I think we would consider ourselves one of the most friendly nations in the world. And like a lot of people from small towns like, Roscrea or Shannon, where we're from, like would think, oh no, it's not, like we're definitely not racist. But like, can you just give the listeners some examples of some of the stuff went on for you and your family when you were growing up? Like,
there were times where, we'd literally have people ringing the house phone and, they'd be N-words said. There would be a lot of go back to your own country and we don't want you here, that type of thing said. And the phone would have to take it off the hook because it just kept ringing and kept ringing. Only recently enough, actually, I was in my own house, in my own family home, and the doorbell rang. And as I opened the door, I could see some kids running around, no more than 10 years of age. And they had left bananas just outside our door, so although I'm giving you examples of what happened when I was younger, it's still something that's very much happening now, 20 years later.
Yeah. As a white person, a white Irish person as I am, like it's, talking about racism and people get very uncomfortable with it, and people get very apprehensive about saying the wrong thing to a Black or a brown person. And I think that's something that we need to collectively grow a lot with, especially people who have this concept that, Ireland isn't a racist country. Like, I'm not trying to drum home the point that it is and make people feel bad or unpatriotic about where they're from. But like most places, the number of Black and brown people was so low. So the way I would try and get you to understand it is if you look at how, as a community, that we treated people in the traveling community, because they're a different race to us, and we are so prejudiced against them. I know, like growing up in Roscrea, like I had neighbours who were travellers, like as early as I can remember, like we just excluded them from everything, from our games, and like we never let them play football with us. And I do feel bad about that now, but I don't think it's about that. It's just kind of acknowledging and saying, look, this happened, it wasn't right, and we need to move on from it and learn and try and spread that awareness about it. Obviously racism isn't okay, but it's just about learning it and owning it and moving forward with it, Yeah,
I think you said something really interesting there about, when you're acknowledging that this thing happened, like we need to be very aware that these things are happening, because the thing is, we can't dismantle something that we're not aware of. So we need to be aware that these things are happening, and we need to actively, be anti-racist, be anti-Islamophobia, be anti-homophobic. We need to be actively pursuing this. For a lot of white people, and I remember talking to a lot during, let's say, the Black Lives Matter movement last year, I had a lot of conversations with my own friends, you included. We had some really, really good conversations where, for the first time ever, we really talked about race. We really talked about how racism actually affected me. And some of the conversations we had were very uncomfortable.
Big time. Yeah.
But you know what? We need to learn to sitting with that uncomfortable feeling, listening to people's experiences. I'm not an expert on critical race or racism or anything like that, but I can teach from my own experience. I can teach you from what I have been through, what I do go through on a day-to-day basis. Because I think in Ireland, we seem to think that racism is very much about somebody walking around and saying the N-word, or an example that I gave where bananas are left on my doorstep. But it's not. There's so much more to it. We need to look at the systematic way that racism is conducted as well. And we need to look at ourselves and kind of think of the unconscious bias that we might hold towards someone based on the color of their skin.
You know, it's an unconscious thing almost. Like, I'm not taking it, like, not trying not to take responsibility from it, but like, you just learn that, for example, using that example of the traveling community, like, that we don't play with them. No one, like, you know, no one, an authority or in my life or my friends ever said that explicitly. We just learned it from the older kids and stuff like that. So it is something that we need to own and try and be better at. The other thing, like, we were actually having a laugh about this, and it kind of, there is a funny element to it, although it's quite serious. Do you remember that time we were I was doing an info talk in the Great Outdoors in Dublin?
Oh, yes.
And you were giving me a hand because I think we'd 100 odd people signed up. Obviously they didn't all turn up, but we still have a big, huge group. And you were kind of signing people in from the door. And like some fella, like, you know, stereotypical Irish old fella kind of came in and he was like, oh, they flew you all the way over from Tanzania for the talk. Isn't that great? Like, and I guess, like, I wasn't there, but talking about it afterwards, like, you know, we and you, like, we didn't correct that guy because we didn't want him to make him feel bad. You know, it's kind of, those are the things that we need to change. I think, like, that we just kind of, we're not, you know, we don't have to worry about his feelings. Just say, listen, actually, you know, that's not actually the case. I'm Irish. Like, is that something that you struggle with, or are you better at that now, or what do you think? What's your feeling on it?
Do you know what? I'm very conflicted on it because, and I remember at the time I was actually there with Elle from the office when we were signing him in, and I remember laughing it off. And she got quite quiet for a few minutes, and she was like, "That wasn't right." You know, she beat herself up a little bit afterwards, kind of going, "I should have told him that wasn't okay." But because I'm so used to exactly what you said, that if I correct somebody on something that I do feel is racist, I've generally 99.9% of the time being told that I'm making a big deal out of nothing. And it has nothing to do with my race. So I've learned to just let a lot of things go. Whereas, thinking back to the example that you've just used, had Elle actually said something that day to that guy, he most likely would have listened to her and apologized for the offense caused than he would have had I made the complaint. Yeah.
I think it's a little bit like that, and it's never happened to me personally, but, like, you know, the one that people will be able to empathize a little bit more is, especially the female listeners, when you're walking across a bar and some fella slaps you on the arse and you turn around and say, "Excuse me, that's not inappropriate," and he's like going like, "Whoa, chill out," making you feel like you're some kind of aggressive person or something like that. It's kind of,
exactly,
it's almost a bit gaslighty in a way, like, you know.
Yeah. And if a man actually calls him out on his behavior, he's most likely going to listen.
Yeah.
So that's when we're talking about racism and we're talking about being an ally and being actively anti-racist. You know, white people need to correct other white people when they do something that they see as being racist.
100%. Yeah.
So we shouldn't shy away from the uncomfortable. I'm not a professional on critical race or racism or anything like that, but I can teach from my own experience. I don't mind if somebody was to ask me, "What would you like me to call you? Do you want me to call you black? Do you want me to call you a person of color? Do you want me to call you, what do you prefer to be called?"
Absolutely, yeah.
I much prefer someone asking me the question than someone saying something and then for me to kind of go, "I'm sorry, that's actually really offensive," and then creating something of a big deal.
I've been there so many times, dude, where, like, I obviously know how to do it now. If I was describing you, I'd have no problem saying Barbara's black or whatever, you know, but it's funny because we get so, as white people, we get so uncomfortable, and the awkwardness, and, like, it's just so unnecessary, you know.
Yeah.
But people just need to ask, you know, like, it's not such a big deal.
We need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. You know, I'm pregnant at the moment. I'm due a little one soon.
Congrats.
Thank you very much. I'm just thinking, like, you know, how do I teach my child if I'm not comfortable with exploring the uncomfortable? I need to be able to explore the uncomfortable. I need to be able to talk about it for me to be able to learn and for me to be able to teach and pass on what I have learned. I think we were talking about this one day and I was just saying, last year with the Black Lives Matter movement, that whole thing where people were putting up a black square on social media, blacking out the media for the day. And that was such a performative gesture.
Yeah.
There was nothing that was going to change that. What we need to start doing is changing the people around us. We need to change the people around us. If your granny, and I guess this, it's a very Irish way of saying, oh, sure, she meant no harm. But if your granny who is, 60, 70, says something that's really offensive, we need to correct them. We need to correct them as well. We can't just keep going, but sure, look, they meant no harm by that, because somebody has been harmed by that. It's going to offend somebody. So we do need to correct it.
We have to have these hard conversations, if we want to make Ireland a better and more inclusive place. I was actually smiling there when you were saying that. Like, I was just thinking, I have an uncle, and I'm mostly vegetarian now, and at Christmas, if you're telling him you're not eating meat, he just goes mental. He's like, what? It's bad for the environment, rubbish, and the same fella, as another person in my life, Hugh, I remember he used this phrase about foreign nationals working and living in Ireland. You say, oh, the non-nationals now are no, they have a nationality, they're not non-nationals and that. But it's something that I had a big conversation with a friend of mine last summer, is about white privilege. And I think people really struggle with that a little bit, because if you take me, for example, I'm a white Irish man, and I've started this business, Earth's Edge, and over the last 13, 14 years it's built up, and I've worked my ass off, and it's been a great success. And the reality is, if I were a woman, it would be harder to do what I've done. And if I was a black person or a black woman even, it would be harder again. And I think sometimes people really struggle with that, because I think when you say that, sometimes white people feel, and particularly men are always acting the bollocks, really, aren't they? But they feel like you're taking away from their effort, you're taking away from their experience. And I think that's something for us to acknowledge. We were chatting earlier this week, you were telling me about a job you're applying for, Babs. Can you talk to me about that one? Tell us a little bit about that, where you kind of felt bias there against you.
Yeah, I suppose, I've been applying for jobs, and I applied for a job with this particular company. The first time I applied for a job, which would have been in 2019, it would have been 2019, just at the very start of the pandemic. And I had applied for a teaching position, and they got back to me and told me that, they weren't looking for anybody that was working within adult education, and they were looking for secondary school teachers. Now, people that I had studied with had applied for the same position, and people had been called for interviews, so I kind of just left it, and I didn't think any more of it. Then the second time I applied for it was during the summer of 2019. Now, everybody knows me as Barbra and everybody knows me as Babs, but my actual first name is Paila Moyo. So as I applied for that job, I did put down Paila Moyo Nzvaura, you see. So that was the second time, was the summer of 2019. I applied for a job. I got a rejection letter, and I thought, okay, great. I'll just send out an email just to see what the feedback was, as to see how come I wasn't shortlisted for an interview. So I did. I got an email back telling me that I just didn't have the relevant experience and I didn't have the relevant qualifications. So with their own job description and all the documentation that they'd used for this job, I went back to them and I said, look, I do have the relevant experience, and I showed X, Y, and Z as to where the experience was, and I had the relevant qualification. And I know some people that I had studied with that actually hadn't even taught some of the subjects that they were advertising for, and they had got interviews and they'd got through. So I sent back another email with my reservations as to, I don't agree with the fact that you said I don't have the relevant experience and the relevant qualifications. And in it, I did mention that I felt discriminated against. And why I felt discriminated against was, I think they looked at my name, and because it's a non-Irish name, I believe that is the main reason why I didn't get an interview. This is not something new. This is not something new to me. It's happened to me in the past before, and it's something that I've kind of grown to accept, but this was the first time I decided to challenge it. After a few weeks of them doing their investigations, they pretty much came back to me and told me that I didn't have a case, and if I'd like to take it further, then I should take it further. I have to admit, I was absolutely devastated after that, because this is a rather big organization, and If I want to work within education, I need to be within this organization.
So you're saying it was an education role. So you're talking about a state-run company or a semi-state, yeah?
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I kind of, I weighed up the options of, if I take it further, do I take it further and have to go through and relive all of this? Relive the fact that I feel like I've been discriminated against, everything, all the emotions that come with it, the psychological impact that's going to come with it? Or do I just leave it and I try again?
Yeah.
And at the time, we were in the middle of a pandemic. There was quite a lot going on for me. I just realized that it wasn't worth my mental health for me to go through it and go further with it. But this is not something that's new to me. This is not something that's new to anybody that doesn't have a non-Irish sounding name. If I had used my partner's name, if I'd actually put down, instead of Paida Moyanjara, should I have put down Barbra Sweeney, would I have got the job? Would I have got an interview?
Totally.
Chances are I probably would have got in. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised at that I'm actually not surprised, but it's not good that that's like a Board of Education or something similar to that. I don't know how, I know there's panels and all this kind of stuff, and I'm not too sure the workings of it, but like going back to a point I made earlier, like I think as an individual, like, I think it's important that rather than people getting apprehensive and closing up and knowing they made a mistake, I think I've potentially done that. I'm not too sure. I don't have the best of memory, but like I started the business at 24 and I hired someone for the first time, probably 27, 28. Like I'd never worked in a business before. So when I was hiring Lauren, who like I remember wanting to have an Irish sounding employee. So I don't know how many people applied for her job, but I know I would have had an unconscious bias, or possibly even slightly conscious, that, if I had seen an African or a Polish name, maybe at the back of my mind, they would have been a little bit further down the pecking order. It's not good. And it's something that I've definitely changed, and we need to try and share that message with other people and hear your experiences and make those changes, because it's so important,
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, it's really like, this is a story that if I was sat here with so many Black people, I can almost guarantee you 9 out of 10 people would have experienced it.
Yeah.
That way they just know and understand that they didn't get a job because of their name, because their name wasn't Irish sounding. I tend to want to ring the company first. It's almost as if I want to get this accent out, kind of go, oh, look, listen to me.
Yeah. Lay on the Clare accent, real thick, like, is this?
Yeah, do you know what I mean? I'm kind of like,
yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean, yeah.
Just before you look at my CV and you look at my name and judge me for that. Especially in education where, like, it's predominantly white. Like, it's very rare you see a Black teacher. And I've had students that have said it to me, like, a student said to me before, it's like, Babs, I've never seen a teacher that looks like you. And I said, what do you mean? I was intrigued, and they said it out. I've never seen a Black teacher. But then when you look at our schools, you look at our universities, they are so diverse. Like, what is sitting in front of us is not matching what is teaching them. Because you can't know something you're not exposed to. And this is where we start to breed racism a lot of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, listen, I think like people have this idea that like places like Ireland are just going to become more and more liberal, like, with repeal the eighth and the marriage referendum and stuff like that. But like, it can go backwards as well. What is the state in the US where they've reversed laws on women's rights and stuff like that? And I think the thing for me is to try and make people aware of this, and also for them to try and empathize. Like, like anyone kind of I'm 38 now, but a bit older than me, like would know about, like, during the Troubles, like when it was difficult for Irish people in the UK. And that's what, a more severe version of that is what you're experiencing on a regular basis. And like, it's actually quite a small thing, but I remember around 2011, 2012, like we started doing a lot of work for Irish charities. And I'd be meeting like potential new clients in offices in Dublin, and they'd be making small talk, and you'd be like, oh, where are you from? I'm like, I'm from Roscrea. And, they'd be kind of the private school scene. And obviously there's a big private school in Roscrea, the Cistercian College. And they'd say to me, oh, did you go to the college? And I'd be like, no, I went to the Tech. And like automatically you're kind of like, shit, like, I'm kind of out of my depth here, so I can only imagine, Babs, like, to have that feeling, but around your color of your skin and whatnot, it would be different ball
Yeah.
game.
It's interesting you're talking about that, because I was just thinking about like certain things that people would say that they don't realize is quite offensive to people, to Black people. Like I've
Yeah.
heard so many times, oh my gosh, you speak great English. I'm kind of like, well,
Your English is pretty good, Babs. You've only been speaking it for
you
whatever
know what
30
I
odd years.
mean?
In
Yeah,
fairness,
I'm like, I've
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
been
I know,
speaking
yeah,
this for a while, so I'd want to be good at it, or the one that really gets me and actually has bred a lot of insecurities in me is, oh, you're very pretty for a Black girl.
wow,
And what does that mean? You would never
yeah,
say
that
that
is
to a
weird.
white person. You'd never say, oh, you're pretty for a white person, or God, you're quite
Yeah,
educated for a Black person. But this is where it happens, as I was saying a while ago, like we need to be educating, or even like a generation that is older than us. We can't keep using this excuse of, oh God, they're from a different generation to us, that they don't,
yeah,
times are changing. They're exposed to a younger generation. You don't want them to be imparting their views or those type of views onto the people that are coming up, that are the future. So we need
absolutely, yeah,
we need to be correcting it as we see it, whatever it might be. Anything that has an ism to it, I think we need to be correcting it. It's uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. God, I've tried to do it in my family a few times, and my God, the silence,
yeah,
But you have to do it, because how are
yeah.
people going to learn? And they will think twice. They will think twice the next time they try and say something offensive.
I had Joe Keena, the Dr. Joe, who you obviously on the podcast last week, and we were talking about being gay in Ireland and on trips and what have you, and he was saying like he even himself is homophobic just from the conditioning and stuff like that. So I think like we all have prejudice, like
Yeah.
I'm sure so it's just trying to bring awareness to them and try and make those little changes and influence people around us, rather than, I don't think anyone is really trying to catch someone out for something they did in the past or anything like that. I just think it's kind of owning it. And, as you say, like if you're unsure on how to address someone with a different color skin than you, all you have to do is just ask, say, Babs, hey, what's the story? Do I call you Black, or what are you comfortable with?
Yeah.
And then go from there.
No, we certainly need to acknowledge our own prejudice. And that's the thing, is how do we learn as people? How do we grow as people if we don't acknowledge our own mistakes, our own flaws? And we need to allow people to be able to make these mistakes. I'm very much for making mistakes. I love a good mistake. I think everybody should own their mistakes. You make a mistake, it's an opportunity to learn. I've definitely made mistakes where it comes to when I'm talking about different communities, the LGBTQ community. I've certainly made mistakes as I was doing that. But I'm so lucky with the people around me that, it's a conversation that can be had and we can all learn. I'm not automatically discredited because I've said the wrong thing. And this is where your circle, that's why when I say, like, we need to educate ourselves and our circle first before putting up a black square and saying, Blackout Tuesday or whatever the hell it was. We need to educate our own circle first. And hopefully inside that circle, they will move outside of that circle and we'll keep growing and keep growing. We're not going to change the world. We're really not going to change the world. And I've had to accept that. But I can change the people around me. I can change the people that I come in contact with. I've had times where I'm in class and somebody said something really offensive and I would stop the class and I will call them out on it straight away. Now, in me calling them out in front of everybody, it's not because I want to make a show of you. I'm calling you in front of everybody because for some people around them, they might not have realized that was offensive, but now they know.
Yeah. If you tell one person and everybody else tells one person, we have the whole world covered. So like, that's all it takes. Like,
absolutely.
Hey, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, I know like your parents are from Zimbabwe and you were there as a kid, but how was it for you to be on Killi and be surrounded by lots and lots of black people and just a couple of white people? That was a bit mental, I'd say, was it?
It was amazing. Do you know what? It was just going back to the motherland, being immersed within African culture again. And it's not something that I would have, in my house, I would be immersed within the African culture. Then I go outside and there's this Irish culture that I'm immersed in. And in the middle there is Babs. You know, so I have a bit of an issue with my identity because sometimes
I can imagine
pulling left and right. But with Killi, it was amazing. It was amazing to actually fully immerse myself within that culture. You know, I'm so used to being a minority that it was actually fantastic to be part of the majority.
Deadly, yeah.
You know, I was so used to being a minority. I just couldn't. You know, the porters were amazing. They saw me and, you know, they treated me like a little sister instead of calling me sissy, you know, as if I was their sister. They really welcomed me into their fold. And, you know, I understand Swahili is quite similar to Shona. So I can understand some of the conversations that were being had. And, you know, I could hear them talking about something and I'd laugh about it. And they'd be like, oh, she gets it, you know, and I'm kind of like, I know, I get it.
Deadly.
You know, so no, Killi has a really, really, it has a dear place in my heart. It really does. And it's somewhere that I can't wait to bring my little one on. He's definitely going to be scaling Killi at some stage.
Yeah, me too. I love Killi. Like, that's going to be awesome. Yeah, it's something to look forward to. Like,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Look, you'll be back doing trips now in about 20 years. Like, you know, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, unless you would like to change your policy.
No, you can't bring your kid with you. Stop. We don't want to be listening to children. Like, but Aenith went on she's got a young boy. She went on a trip pretty quickly after she had him. And same with Hannah, one of our doctors. She's got 2 small boys, and she went to Ladakh for 16 days. Apparently, when she came back though, she was saying that they were really cranky and angry. You know, I think they were pissed off with her that they were happy to see her with her, but pissed off with her that she'd left as well. You know, so that's quite funny.
Well, look, I hope when the world does open up and, you know, my little one is a couple of months old, I'll start scaling. I'll start with Claire. We'll start with Claire first.
Yeah.
And then hopefully go back. Like I said, I'd love, you know, I did some wonderful trips. I would love to show him, like, Stock Angry. I have to go back. Unfinished business with the mountain. So I need to go back.
Yeah, no doubt you will, Babs. That's absolutely awesome, man. I love that chat. Thank you so much for the time on that one.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Take it easy, Babs.
Bye now.
This podcast was produced by Earth's Edge. We're a small business based in Ireland who organise big adventures all over the world. For more information about us and the trips discussed on this podcast, visit earths-edge.com or follow us on Instagram. Don't forget to sign up to our mailing list to be in the running to win one of our summit jackets. There's a link in the show notes. And while you're there, if you could subscribe and review the podcast, that'd be brilliant. I'm your host, James McManus. Thanks for listening and have a super week.